Hey guys, Dr. Dion here. Today I'm going to talk to you about foot placement in surfing, particularly whether you want to consider yourself a front-footed, back-footed, or neutral stance surfer. We're going to go through a lot of examples, a pretty long video. Starts with a front-footed surfer, classical front-footed surfer, that's Dane Reynolds. Then we're going to look at the extreme back-footed surfing of Sonny Garcia. I hope that you can really see the difference in these two very extreme examples. Then we're going to look at a third expert elite surfer, Rob Machado, who has a more neutral stance. Then the second half of the video is about back-footed, front-footed surfing in not pros. All right, so I have two of my clients from my last trip to Sumatra, Carlos and Bryce. Then I show a little bit of my own surfing and some examples of advanced expert surfers that I videoed on my trip. The main thesis is that for beginning and intermediate surfers, the distinction between back-footed and front-footed does not make as much sense for you guys. It makes more sense in the advanced shortboarding context, as you'll see, to talk about it, but also a lot of advancing surfers have a tendency to put too much pressure on their front foot, thinking it will make them go faster, without learning to have a neutral stance wherein you initiate your turns with your back foot first. So it doesn't matter whether you end up being a more front-footed, a more back-footed, or a more neutral stance surfer at the end of the day. We all initiate turns with our back foot. That's how the surfboard works. And that is also the case riding mid-lengths and longboards. You need to learn to find the tail, because if you look at the shape of a surfboard, it's designed so that you pivot around the tail. That's why fins are important. That's why tail shape is important. That's why what's going on with the rails, especially at the back of the surf, the whole rails of the surfboard are important, but especially in that 12 inches that takes up the back of the surfboard, those are very important. And all of the different kind of bottom contour stuff, double concave, single concave, V, whatever you have on the bottom in between the fin cluster, really determines how much air and water you are able to push out the back of the board on any given kind of wave and type of surfboard that you're riding. So the tail of the board, I always argue, it has the most interesting design elements because it's so important in how the surfboard is going to move through the water and how you're going to direct the surfboard on the face of the wave. All right, so here you go. I recommend watching through the whole thing, but if you're just interested in like what's the difference between front-footed and back-footed in expert surfing, you can just watch through to Rob Machado. But if you're curious about what it's like for beginning and intermediates, you'll want to watch through the whole video. Okay? All right. Thanks for being here. And let me know what you think. Like and subscribe right now. Might as well do it at the start. And yeah, see you guys later. All right. Going over front foot versus back foot surfing, or front-footed versus back-footed surfing, starting with Dane Reynolds here. Dane Reynolds is the classical front-footed surfer, and we're going to talk about what that means, because a lot of people are confused about what it means to be a front-footed surfer and a back-footed surfer. Okay. So let's watch him go through some turns. This is what it means. This right here is basically a perfect illustration of what it means. He's bottom turning, pushing through with his back foot, transferring weight onto his front foot, and as he goes into this fin throw, he's going to push out with his back foot and transfer his weight onto his front foot. Goes up into the lip here. So I want to make it clear that being a front-footed surfer doesn't mean you're not using your back foot or that you aren't even heavy on your back foot. He's pushing hard with his back foot, but as soon as he hits the lip, he's going to release. And here he's transferring the weight onto the front foot. That's literally what it means to be a front-footed surfer, is that you're able to more easily transfer weight from your back foot to your front foot. And we'll see the difference with Sonny Garcia, who is a true back-footed surfer. So here, he's using his front foot to connect the board to the wave. The back foot's still connected to the board, but it's the front foot that is pivoting so that he can complete this radical maneuver. It's pretty insane. Now he's going to catch, the fins catch, and he pulls it off. And looks like he blew his fin out. Watch some more of his surfing. Let's just slow it down a little bit. And when people are pumping, so, you know, if we look back here, just this one pump, people are going to say that this pump that he does right here constitutes front-footed surfing. So you can see he's leaning forward a bit. There's some pressure here after he's pushed off with his back foot. So this pressure that he's putting right here very briefly to gain speed is part of what constitutes front-footed surfing. But he's not continuing to lean over that front foot. Now he's pushing with his back foot again. So just trying to make it clear that being a front-footed surfer doesn't mean you're always applying pressure with your front foot. You're going to see him, again, that ability to shift weight onto the front foot, to de-weight the back foot, to throw the tail out the back. And so for super advanced shortboard surfing, being able to transition from this foot to that foot and then back to your back foot, a more front-footed approach or an ability to weight your front foot is very beneficial if you're going to do this kind of super radical fin-free surfing. It's hard to get the fins free if you're always keeping them connected to the water. So you can just see more of that same thing. It's pretty subtle. Let's watch the pumping here. The pump starts back here, but he does shift the weight forward. So let's just watch this. Now the pressure is here, but then it's applied again back here. So once again, it's more about applying pressure from the back and moving it forward than applying a pressure from the back again and moving it forward. There's the pressure on the back, moves it forward onto the front foot there, pressure from the back there, and so there is pressure on the front foot, but watch the back foot is still engaged. And something like this is initiated with the back foot as he transitions onto this front foot to land. Okay? So if you want to be a very radical surfer, learn to put pressure onto your front foot. But until you have the basics down, I don't want beginners to confuse leaning over that front foot, putting too much pressure on your front foot as just you being a front-footed surfer. That's not the case. So let's look at Sonny Garcia, and then we'll look at Rob Machado, who has a neutral stance, and hopefully it will be all cleared up for you guys. All right, here we go. Sonny Garcia, the classic back-footed surfer. Pretty sad story about Sonny. I think he is still somewhere in a coma. He tried to commit suicide. Proof in the pudding that surfing does not solve all your problems. But when he was well, he was one of the best surfers in the world, world champion, and the quintessential back-footed surfer. This turn, just like Dane Reynolds' first turn with the fin release, is going to be a clear example of back-footed surfing. Sonny is going into this turn with his back foot weighted. He's going to lean back as he pushes through the lip. So he's actually leaning this way. Remember, Dane Reynolds leans the other way. So Sonny is leaning back and just pushing. The front foot's connected, but as he goes through this turn, he's going to continue to push with the back foot. Front foot's connected, but he's not leaning over it. He's still leaning back, leaning more this way, and just continuing to power through with that back foot. Throwing an enormous amount of spray, recovers over the back foot, and then we'll watch him do some other surfing, more surfing. Standard little top turn here. Let's go half motion. This is Jeffreys Bay in South Africa. We're going to do a foam climb over the back foot. Kind of neutral as he comes up onto the wave face. And watch him now. Pushing through with that back foot. So really pushing hard. He is transferring weight onto the front foot. And this is the main nuance that I want everybody to understand. We surf on both feet. A back-footed surfer is just slightly heavier on the back foot. And a front-footed surfer is able to de-weight the back foot a little easier than a back-footed surfer is. But everybody is initiating turns with their back foot and in most cases shifting at least some weight to the front foot. We're not one-legged here in our surfing. You know, arguably he's a little, but you could see he's a little over his front foot here, but still we would call this maybe a little bit even more neutral, where Dane Reynolds was definitely leaning over this way, anticipating and pushing, getting more air out of the fins in the back and weighting onto the front foot. Two Bride. And even in just half motion here, you can just, it's very clear. Look at this. Boom. Back-footed surfing. Leaning back. This is a layback off the top. And recovers over the back foot here. Right? So as we watch this, we see him recover over the back foot. Leaning back. Front foot's connected, but the back foot's doing the majority of the work here. And he's going to recover over this foot rather than leaning over this one, de-weighting, which would have equated to a completely different turn. And again, even the wrap here, there is momentum moving this way, but he's pushing out with this back hip. Pushing out with the back leg more. This is classic back-footed surfing. I hope you can see the difference between classic back-footed versus classical front-footed surfing in the distinction between Dane Reynolds and Sonny Garcia. Very stark. Now let's look at Rob Machado. All right, here's Rob Machado. He's a goofy foot. I think those of you who follow my own surfing will see that I've modeled a lot of my style off of Machado. Never got a perfect fit, and he was runner-up in the world title many times, one of the best surfers that ever has been on planet Earth, and I would call him a more neutral stance surfer. So keep in mind what we saw from Dane Reynolds and from Sonny Garcia. Look at Rob's feet as we're going through this, and you'll see that he's pretty even in the way he distributes weight over both feet. Very neutral. A little bit of pressure on the front, substantial pressure on the back. Gonna hit with the back foot. Tiny little transition here. He's riding a funny little Machado Designs board, surfing one of his local waves. Moves his back foot back over the tail pad. Just keep noticing that bit of movement over the pad. That's important for everybody. And so if you want to develop a really smooth flowing style, probably the best thing to do is just like develop a neutral stance like Rob Machado. Let's take a look at this. This has nothing to do with back foot or front foot, but I teach this a lot of times. Just getting those hips off the board, high chest, allows you to get up really smoothly. Watch Rob do some backside surfing. Finds the tail, opens the shoulders, pushes through, transfers a little weight onto the front foot there, rights himself up into his neutral stance, hits the section again, and yeah, just classic neutral stance surfing. Always initiating turns with the back foot here. Rob's going to push through, pushing through with his back leg. Tiny bit of, this is what I mean where Sonny was so leaning back and Dane is so leaning forward. Machado has some pressure here, but continues to apply pressure here. Pretty neutral, opening his shoulders to the whitewater. Yeeks. I hate when that happens with this app. Get to that turn. Right after that backside. Here it is. Right here, opening his shoulders, got it right to the place, and transitioning out again. Opens his shoulders to the lip, weight over the back foot, lifts the board up. It's like a classic Machado turn right here. And even in this, right, this shows a distinction between him and Reynolds, for example. With the neutral stance, he does a flick here, but he's not doing that same crazy fin throwing maneuver. A little on the front here, but just to drive back over the back foot and perform a really nice roundhouse at the end of this wave. All right, so there you have it. Machado with the neutral stance, and Dane Reynolds with the front-footed, Sonny Garcia with the back-footed. Now let's talk about front-footed versus back-footed surfing in intermediate practices, which looks a little bit different than the experts that we were going through before. So this is my client, Carlos. And this is from our recent trip to Sumatra. And we are working on this very issue. So you see, in general, he's trying to push through with this leg, but his body is leaning more on the front leg. In general, his energy is moving this way, and he's not really pushing out with this back leg. Okay, so Carlos, like a lot of intermediate surfers, puts too much pressure on the front leg without initiating first with the back leg. And that is a common mistake easily done by intermediate surfers. Now you can see here the way he's compressed over this front leg. And that adds pressure to this part of the board, not pushing air through the fins and water through the fins with the back leg. This actually slows you down and it closes off your space right here to do more advanced maneuvers. I want to make this point really clear. This is what I'm working on with Carlos, and we're trying to open up this part of his surfing right here so that he can really activate the back leg. It's not that it's bad to be a front-footed surfer. As we saw, Dane Reynolds absolutely rips. But when you're an intermediate and you're closing off your space by putting too much pressure on this front foot, you're actually slowing yourself down. So in the advanced context, the front-footed surfers are the faster surfers because of the way they're able to transfer weight from the back foot to the front foot. But in the intermediate context, putting too much pressure on that front foot slows you down. This was the start of the trip, or like midway through, before we really started talking about having him initiate more turns with the back foot. So we'll go through A little bit more of Carlos's surfing here. You can see how he's leaning on that front foot, but really trying to get the back foot engaged. Middle of the trip. And now this is towards the back end of the trip, riding a different board here and trying to open up. You see him actually really trying to concertedly open up this part of his body that he was closing off at the beginning of the trip. He could still be pushing through harder with this foot, but we have a more positive view of his surfboard here, tracking on the rail, starting to push a little bit more water out here. Okay? And this is why people get coaching. Notice he's still bending over that front foot, but he's carrying much more speed down the line since he shifted his weight back. Here he goes again. So here we see Carlos trying to keep his weight back here, right? He's not bending over. Once again, he could be trusting his butt more and pushing through with this foot harder, but just being in this more upright stance is giving him a little bit more flow or a more neutral stance rather than coming over and pushing down with this leg. So he's flowing better just in his effort to stop pressing down on that front foot. We noticed it really right here. There we go, right here. He has a nice neutral stance, and this would have been a good place for Carlos to basically sit his butt down and move into a bottom turn and wrap up here. That's probably what is next for his surfing. Instead, old habits die hard, and he leans forward again and closes himself off. But, that's learning, that's getting better. And just stoked that we made some positive progress with the flow in this trip. Okay, here I am, just for comparison. I'd say that I'm a back-footed or neutral-footed surfer. As I said in the Machado part, I nowhere surf exactly like him, but I did model my surfing off of his. We do have a very different style. You never can fully imitate somebody. So what I mean when I think Carlos ought to trust his butt is you go down to the bottom of the wave here, and you see my stance is neutral throughout all of this. The shoulder is open, and I get to the bottom and lean back, pretty neutral-footed stance here. I'm pushing through, and we always want the board to look like this when we're bottom turning. You want to see like one fin and the nose coming out of the water. And that is because I'm pushing through with the back foot and guiding with the front foot. That section didn't offer it to me, just gaining speed again. I'm going to draw a central line and just go through this little tube here. Then coming out of the tube, pressure over the back foot. Going down to the bottom of the wave, down to the bottom. Righting myself up, and though you see a little movement forward here, watch what happens with the back foot. Gonna press through. I have a pretty neutral stance now looking at it here. Not a Sonny Garcia by any means. That front shoulder's completely opened. Then I'm gonna pivot around on the back foot and pushing through, neutral stance again, pushing through with the back foot, just guiding with the front foot, pushing a little harder with the back foot here to complete the turn and be done with the wave. Pushing through with the back foot, it's a little bit more back-footed. Just going into a turn, leaning back for a little layback. But you can see the surfing is over this foot. Again, I have a more neutral stance. I'm not shifting a lot of weight onto my front foot. I'm actually not quite, that's not my style, and I'm not that good at it. But you don't have to be. It's not everybody's style. The key to understand here is just that we want to initiate turns with our back foot, whether we're front-footed or back-footed surfers. Now here is a regular foot. Here's Bryce surfing front side. This is from the start of the trip. And Bryce pretty neutral right here, but then watch when he goes onto this turn. So he goes to turn and he's shifting, he shifts his weight. His weight is also forward. He's a little over-rotated with his upper body, meaning that this arm is not opened up, and he's not kicking through with this foot. It's very common for advancing surfers, beginners, intermediates, to put just too much pressure on this foot. Okay, so let's watch him go through this turn and see how he's leaning forward and trying to get the rotation here, but the board is stuck. It won't. Unless he opens this arm and kicks through with this leg, the turn is not going to happen. Instead, what happens is he falls down. Here we go, Bryce again. When he's in his neutral stance and over his back foot, the turn looks really good. And we have a similar thing to the other turn. Even here, you can see his pressure is on this foot and he's trying to pivot around this foot, but the board does not pivot there. The board does not pivot there. The board pivots here. So whether you're front-footed or back-footed, you need to use this foot to kick through and open those shoulders up to allow your back foot to work, okay? Let's just see. He's trying to push through, but this was more of a case, he was pushing through, but this was more of the case that he just didn't have the arms open enough. He wasn't centered over the stringer of the board. And there is just a little bit too much pressure on this foot to get the pivot around there. The rail is going to catch. And again, he's going to fall over. Now, this is more towards the end of the trip, and he's surfing more over the back of the board. Note here, look at, he's now much more over the back of the board, open to the lip. And this is just a check turn, but he's leaning more over the back foot, so, you know, this is out of the water, so he's actually pulling the turn. Next one, nice bottom turn. Butts down. Again, shoulders are open, pressing through. The board has that nice shape that we like to see, connected to the water, fins coming out. And going up into that lip and leaning back just a bit. This is just the start of Bryce's more radical surfing. And this is a step in the right direction for him. He could have kicked that back foot out a little bit more, but you know, look at this bottom turn too. He's just gonna pop through the wave at this point, but still looking a lot better from start of the trip to the end of the trip. We also got him doing more confident takeoffs here, and nice high line, foot's just in front of the tail pad, and here, you know, probably could have gone up and hit the lip here, and leaning still a little bit forward, but this is not bad front-footedness necessarily. If he wants to hit the lip over there, though, he's going to have to move this foot back and just take aim and clock it. All right, so there's some examples of intermediate surfers, back-footed and front-footedness. A lot of intermediate surfers are too heavy on that front foot. And here are some average better surfers from the trip. Neutral stance, this guy, really nice turn. Let's just look at the mechanics of this turn. Pushing through with that back foot, letting himself launch up, leaning over onto the front, but he's gonna push through. See, here is where he's pushing through, and I want you to notice this shoulder is open. The arm's not going the opposite direction, closing himself off, and he's gonna push through with his back foot, pushing through, staying over the surfboard. You even see his front foot coming off, going onto that heel side, so that he's actually putting even more pressure this way and onto this rail. coming down, rooting his back foot over that flat fish, babying the rail, which one has to do on a fish surfboard, leans over his front foot and then rights up over his back foot to get this tube and comes out of the tube. Nice surfing there. Another frontside surfer. Let's watch him. Little tube off the takeoff into a cutback. We see this theme here. He's a little more front-footed, Batiste, but opening the shoulders, pushing through with the back foot. Even though he's leaning forward onto this front foot, he's still pushing through with his back foot. Engages the fins again, off the bottom, keeping the shoulders open, pushing through with the back foot, and pushing through with the back foot again. He is more front-footed than the other guy. He does lean over this, but we have his back foot firmly rooted and initiating his turns. So he'll right back up over his back foot again. And this one, he's just going to kick out. Kicking out again, using an open body, slight pressure over the back, not leaning over the front foot and tripping over himself as he exits this wave. All right, so I hope this video is helpful for you. It's a little bit long, lots of examples of front-footed, back-footed, and neutral stance surfers from the super advanced elite level to intermediate to, advanced expert. I'd say all of us average better than everyday surfers at the back half of this video. Like, subscribe, comment. Thank you guys for being here, and I will see you another time. All right.